Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be starting in about 1 minute. All right, that's good. I think we'll start. We've got a lot of people signed up. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Atar Naki, and I'm the head of strategic alliances at Locate. In today's webinar, we will share Q1 market trends and articulate why digital and borderless commerce will further continue to grow. Our experts will give their insights on what businesses should focus on now to accelerate the digitization of their businesses and lead the economic recovery. Some quick housekeeping items. Everyone will receive a copy of this presentation of this webinar via email. And also please do ask questions via the Q&A chat tool, and they will be answered by the speakers at the end of this webinar. Let me go to the next slide. All right, let me briefly introduce our speakers and the companies that they represent as to give you some more context on who they are and the insights they will be sharing today. Justin Dooling is the Senior VP and Commercial Director for Loqate and is responsible for leading the global partner business and its expansion across key markets. Justin has over 20 years of leadership experience in payments, financial technology, location and identity verification industries. He is a seasoned speaker and thought leader, presenting annually at key technology conferences such as IBM Think, Oracle Open World, as well as Oracle Modern Customer Experience. Justin is Loqate's fearsome leader in North America and no doubt a great person to work for. Eric Rosenthal is a fintech and global corporate financial expert, currently serving as Rapid's Vice President and Managing Director for the Americas. Eric oversees business operations and expansions throughout the US, Canada, and all of Latin America. Prior to his work at Rapid, Eric worked across Asia, Latin America, and Europe for a number of Fortune 500 companies, including First Data, Citigroup, and McKinsey. You must be thinking why these two companies are doing a joint webinar. So Rapid and Loqate became partners as part of bolstering KYC checks, know your customer. As you know, KYC is the financial services mandatory process of identifying and verifying the identity of customers. Let us start explaining the relevance of this partnership in the context of powering digital commerce by giving you a quick overview of Loqate and Rapid. Let me start talking about Loqate, and then I'll ask Eric to introduce Rapid. So Loqate, we are the leading developer of global address verification and geocoding solutions. We are our partners, global address and geocoding data experts, so they don't have to invest time in that. Loqate builds and develops premium address and geocoding reference data sets and platforms, engines, covering all countries and territories in the world. Every day, we are enabling our partners to integrate our APIs into their applications and product lines to continuously update, standardize, and provide rich location intelligence services. As a partner-first organization, Loqate has also established strategic go-to-market partnerships with the world's leading software and technology companies such as IBM and Oracle and SAS. Loqate's parent company, GBG, is a global specialist in identity and location data intelligence. We have combined our technology engines with trillions of data records relating to locations and people's identity from all over the world. GBT has the ability to verify over 4.4 billion people and address locations across all countries and territories. With headquarters in Chester, UK, and satellite offices in over 18 countries, including office in Atlanta, San Francisco, and New York City, we are a stable, growing global firm. Let me turn it to Eric for an introduction to Rapid. Eric?
Good morning and thank you. My name is Eric Rosenthal, and as Naki suggested, I am the Managing Director and Vice President of the Americas of Rapid. Rapid is a global company with 4 major offices in the United States, based here in California, Israel, where we are based as the headquarters, the office in London, and an office in Singapore. Rapid provides companies with a single platform that allows companies to connect to Rapid's platform to facilitate global commerce and connect to global payment methods all over the world. Rapid's FinTech as a Service platform is used by challenger banks, e-commerce merchants, businesses, and a variety of other platform businesses that are looking for an easy way to expand globally, as well as expand across multiple use cases. In the next slide, see that the Rapid platform enables companies to collect funds across 100 different countries, connect to over 900 different payment methods, store over 65 different currencies, and facilitate the ability to collect payments across banks, cards, e-wallets, and a variety in cash networks, as well as disperse payments across 170 different countries. Pleased to be with you today, and we'll talk a little bit more about Rapid and how we're working together with Loqate throughout the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Eric. So let's dive into the digital commerce trends we are seeing in Q1 as we enter into creating what we call now new norms. As governments have asked non-essential brands and retailers to shutter their physical stores, consumers had no choice but to turn to digital channels for discretionary categories and for any purchases. This is the analysis done by Digital Commerce from over 1 billion shoppers worldwide. It shows that Q1's 20% global digital revenue growth even outpaced what was a very strong 2019 holiday shopping season. No doubt, very impressive. Let me get my speakers engaged here. I'll start with Justin. Justin, can you kind of tell us what impact COVID-19 has had on e-commerce and what business trends you see leading us into a post-COVID recovery?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Naki. I think the short answer is that we all observed through the unique, common, worldwide experience that business models for retailers and e-tailers changed overnight. Right? We saw supply chain disruption. We saw surges in certain areas, and the businesses needed to adapt to survive. So if we take a look at the numbers that we view from our platforms and our partners' platforms, the first quarter started off fairly consistent with prior years, following the holiday season, and things changed once the virus began to spread. In particular, there was a 41% spike in digital revenue during the final 15 days of the quarter. With the increase in demand, along with the shuttering of stores and distribution centers, we started to see some retailers struggling to pivot their operations and adapt more to the traditional e-commerce model of pick and pack and ship orders. Some scrambled to accelerate and retool supply chains to offer curbside pickup, drive-through, and home delivery for a contactless last mile. And those who had robust digital channels were able to more quickly adjust to deliver for their customers. In general terms, what we saw during the first few weeks as the world went into lockdown was e-commerce centric businesses thrived. Businesses with robust secondary digital channels adjusted, and businesses with limited to no digital capability came to a near and complete stop. If we look on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about consumer behavior. If we look at the period between March 10 and March 20, spending on essential goods via digital channels surged by 200%. And so for everybody who tried to order toilet paper online, that spike is for you. And it remained elevated throughout the quarter. Shopping digitally for essential categories such as food and personal care items has now become commonplace. There's a big caveat to the surge in digital spend, though. Brands and retailers are using high discount rates to help drive the demand and to liquidate their inventory. Discount rates in the US surged 34% in mid-March, well above discounts seen during Cyber Week. This trend was mirrored globally as March became a critical month in containing the virus across the world. So predictions are naturally that digital spending will level off some as we move out of lockdown. The expectation is that some consumers will continue to operate in a risk-averse mode once shelter-in-place mandates are lifted, and over time, purchasing behaviors formed during the crisis will remain. Digital commerce is no longer a secondary channel. And if we look on the next slide, the Loqate autocomplete addressing solution called Capture Plus well, it's our platform that we operate, and because it's mostly consumer-facing e-commerce, we got a good idea of transaction volumes and consumer behaviors. So, for example, there's global brands of Nike and Kohl's.com that utilize the platform. So we've seen the trends over time. And increase of 50% on daily volumes during these lockdown periods. And on the next slide, just because we get a good view and our heritage at Loqate is in the UK, we have a very large customer base in the UK. One of the consumer behavior anecdotes that I found personally heartwarming was on Thursdays in the UK, people go outside at 8 o'clock to applaud NHS and show their appreciation for the frontline workers. And so you can see on this chart is a daily chart of a Thursday, and at 8 p.m. transaction volume dips significantly and picks right back up several minutes later when people go back in after applauding the NHS. So it's not all bad news, and it was kind of neat to witness that the heartwarming consumer behavior via our platform. And then on the next slide, I guess in summary, globally we are seeing a dramatic shift to digital browsing and buying. For the first 2 months of the crisis, we saw retailers being impacted dramatically around the world. Businesses and consumers changed the way they operated nearly instantly. Brick and mortar locations closed or limited operations because of the social distancing measures, and people across nearly every demographic were thrust into the digital world for their social interaction, well-being, health and wellness information, and as well as their shopping needs. Despite the economic uncertainty, it's clear that people want to make themselves more comfortable as they transition to work and personal life at home, whether it's arts and crafts items to make their home environment or work from home attire more comfortable. Consumers are spending beyond the essentials. Some spending will be temporary, but the habits that have been formed and will likely continue and exacerbate the already increasing trend from a brick and mortar retail to an e-commerce driven world. So what a business needs to do, if they haven't done it already, they need to accelerate their ability to conduct digital commerce and generate revenue anywhere, anytime customers choose. This is where the digitalization of commerce must include fintech and payments to power borderless shopping. All right, Naki, that was a little long-winded answer, but back to you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Justin, for giving us a really good sense of where we stand. And the key takeaway is that digital commerce across the border is accelerating, and you either participate or you basically die. Eric, let me kind of ask you a question here for our customers who no doubt want to take advantage of this. digitization or digitalization of commerce, how do you see challenges and opportunities pre/post-COVID as related to fintech, payments, and location data to expand local markets?
Excellent question. So I think ultimately I'll break this response down into, as you said, what we learned from the pre-COVID and versus what we need to do as a result of the post-COVID. I think that ultimately what we saw, as Justin was highlighting during the pre-COVID, is that those businesses that had already begun the path of adapting to digital channels and had already as well, what we would actually observe as well, those businesses that were well positioned to sell across multiple markets were able to not only in some cases accelerate their growth during this period of COVID, which obviously continues as of right now, but as well being fairly resilient to the shock to the system. Similar to any kind of natural disaster, you have a stage in which you observe from during the natural disaster, which were those businesses, which were those organizations that were able to be more resilient to a shock to the system, and ultimately which are going to be the ones that are able to adapt and remain resilient and continue to take advantage of this situation for the positive. What Rapid is actually seeing that's one of the challenges and opportunities in digital commerce is, first and foremost, the fundamental challenge is there's now a proliferation of payment methods. There's a proliferation of different ways that people are accustomed to paying. So for those businesses that we've observed, particularly those that are selling cross-border, those that are selling across multiple countries, what they observed is they may have actually positioned themselves to sell using the credit card, to sell using cards, but yet what they discovered along the way is that people in Mexico, for example, have traditionally been paying using cash or traditionally been paying using bank transfers. In this period of COVID, what they've actually been able to do is they've continued to want to pay the way that they might be paying for their bills or the way that they might be paying using local e-commerce websites. So those companies that have been able to adapt or were already well adapted to that have been able to take advantage of this situation. So we really have this dynamic right now where you have a significant amount of fragmentation and proliferation of different payment methods, and particularly keeping in mind that only 18.4% of the world even has a credit card. In places like India, people are using real-time bank transfers using the system called UPI. In places in Africa, people are using mobile wallets in order to pay. So the lesson learned really here is those businesses that had actually begun to prepare to a certain degree for a situation of diversification of payment methods, not necessarily for the COVID situation, were able to continue to sell throughout and accelerate their businesses. And now on a go-forward basis, companies that are looking to accelerate their exit from the situation should be thinking about how to continue to diversify not only their payment methods, but as well their geographical coverage. What you'll see on the next slide as well is that really you have this dynamic. If you could actually go back to the one right before that, sorry about that. You really have this dynamic that people want to be able to pay the way they're accustomed to be able to pay. So in the similar dynamic of what Loqate focuses on helping to not only manage the element of fraud at the checkout, but as well as managing the conversion. The easier it is for a client and for your customer to be able to check out and complete the transaction, you're obviously going to experience more conversion. If someone gets to a checkout page and he or she is only presented with the option of using a credit card and they don't have a credit card, you're not going to be able to convert them. If a business needs to pay another business and the business is accustomed to using a bank transfer to be able to pay, and you only present them with a credit card, they're not going to be able to pay you. So ultimately what we're recognizing is this fragmentation and proliferation of different payment methods, and ultimately call it all the complementary services around it, was already happening before COVID. What COVID really has done is accentuated the realization that those businesses that were already in the process of adapting to this, call it new payments environment, were able to sustain their business, or at least be able to, in some cases, be able to accelerate. What we'll also see in the next slide, which also speaks to the fact of how and why Rapid is working with Loqate, is that when companies think about diversifying their strategy, particularly coming out of COVID, is there are going to be waves throughout not only this country of different states and different communities that are coming out of shelter in place and whose buying behaviors will either sustain as being primarily digital versus not, but the same thing's going to happen as well across borders. And therefore, what we've observed in the past is that those companies that are thinking about how to make sure that if they're hard hit in one geo, that they're able to offset that they need to be able to think about going cross-border, and they need to be able to think about expanding globally. But that payments is just one component. Another component is, can we verify the identity of the buyer and therefore use the address verification solution that Loqate has to validate an address and therefore help to lower the fraud rate? Can we actually localize our website so that people are able to check out the way that they're accustomed to checking out? Can we actually optimize our logistics? And of course, as Rapid's primary focus, can they actually pay using the payment method that they're accustomed to using?
Thank you, Eric. Very helpful. I did not realize that in some demographics like India, the credit card penetration is so low. So in context of having this cross-border payment capabilities that are supporting local customers' requirements and needs, why is digitalization of commerce is important?
Yeah, so as we'll see in the next slide, first just a level to give some context of how prevalent cross-border is that particularly I imagine on this call we have mostly American businesses or businesses that are based in North America. The vast majority of people that are buying cross-border are buying from US-based businesses. So it's quite prevalent in Latin America for people to be shopping from Latin America on US websites, whether they're buying a digital good or whether they're buying a physical good, whether they're purchasing type of service, or in many cases, whether it's one business sourcing products or services from another business. And this has to do with a variety of different, to a certain degree, commonsensical dynamics. One is a significant variety of different products that the US market may have that their local markets don't have, as well as price. So when we think about why people are shopping cross-border is, I think, similar to what COVID has taught us about what the significant impact that globalization has had upon the world, is that this is a reality. So in a place like the United States, for example, almost $500 billion or more than $500 billion of our payments volume by default is already cross-border, it's already very international. And this includes business-to-business payments as well as consumer-to-business payments. And therefore, what we're seeing is that those businesses that have been able to understand the local preferences are the ones that are able to do it. So a very classical scenario is a business in the United States might discover along the way that it might be selling into Brazil, or it might be selling into Argentina, or it might be selling in even just to Europe. And what they begin to see, the sort of classical conversation that we have with them, is that they're using credit cards and they're beginning to see interest because of their products, because of their service. They see where people are coming from. But then what they begin to discover is that the acceptance rates of those payment methods is quite low due to the fact that it's considered a cross-border transaction. The second thing that they begin to realize is that when they begin to understand the demographics of the countries that they're selling into, such as Brazil and Argentina, they realize that the vast majority of people there do not have a credit card. And if they do have a bank account, therefore a local debit card, that local debit card is actually not provisioned or configured in order to facilitate a cross-border transaction. So they find themselves in this sort of dilemma that they want to sell more, and particularly, as I was saying now in the context of COVID, being able to sell cross-border, particularly when people will likely continue to be stuck in their homes in places that are hardest hit, such as Brazil, Peru, and other countries throughout Latin America, for example. People are going to want to be able to transact, but if they can't actually pay, they're not going to transact with you. Now, the other dynamic that we continue to hear, very commonly hear from clients that we serve, is that 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, they made a decision to go global, but they thought very limitedly about this notion of going global. They thought about the BRIC countries. They thought about, how do I sell into Brazil? How do I sell into India? How do I sell into perhaps Turkey or China? Those are 5 countries of over 200 different countries we have in the world. And the effort that was required in order for them to integrate into those local payment methods typically has led to a dynamic where they plateaued. They were not able to expand into more. Along the way, as I was mentioning earlier, we've seen the proliferation of local payment methods. So when they started off and said, let me figure out how to enable boleto, which is a common payment method in Brazil, well, fast forward to 2020, Brazil is months away from launching their own real-time payment method that will probably, within a year or two, supersede boleto as the primary payment method. So how do you begin to future-proof, and how do you begin to ultimately imagine that what you want to invest in may soon become called expired? If you move on to the next slide, what you'll also see is that local payment methods constantly really matter. So it's very similar dynamic where I think just to sort of situate this in the US reality, or the reality of many of us on this call, is when you get to the checkout, whether it's online or at the supermarket, and you're told that you can't pay the way that you want to pay. So if you're holding an American Express card and American Express is not accepted, if you're holding a Discover card and Discover is not accepted, or you want to pay with a check and checks are not accepted, unless you have a significant no other choice to transact with that business, the likely dynamic is that you're going to not transact with that business. What you're likely going to do is you're going to go elsewhere. And therefore, it's really important to consider that in many markets that throughout the world, 19% of online transactions are actually still taking place in cash. This is a dynamic where someone is initiating the transaction on a website, on an app, on a phone, and then when they get to checkout, they're selecting I want to pay in cash and then going offline and paying in cash. And this is still happening even despite the shelter in place. We've seen this with a number of our clients that many of the traditional cash channels have actually been closed, and this is only the essential businesses, the 7-Elevens, the supermarkets that remain open, and therefore they continue to see their buyers going to those channels to pay in cash. The other thing that we've witnessed is that bank transfers as a form of payment, even in the United States and throughout the world, bank transfers have typically been seen as ways of paying people's bills, paying your electricity bill, paying your phone bill, paying other bills, but have rarely been really considered as a way of facilitating commerce. What we're seeing in the context of COVID is that those companies that had actually already integrated bank transfers as a checkout payment method have been able to take advantage of this, of the current lockdowns, where someone says, well, if I'm already paying my electricity bill using a bank transfer, I could actually use this bank transfer to buy my groceries, to buy some shoes, to shop effectively online. And those companies that had already integrated in bank transfers have been able to sustain with less impact than those that only were really being very credit card centric. Lastly, primarily in the case of Africa, but as well, we see e-wallets. And if you've seen what's been happening with other companies that are in the wallet space, people are also using wallets to transact online. So the net really message is, if you're a company that's thinking about what do I do next and what can I learn from this situation, really the message is you need to consider the fact that local payment methods are critical, as well as the diversification of payment methods, even in the United States.
Great, thank you. Very insightful information, Eric. Really appreciate it. So I guess this will be a question for both Justin and Eric. So what will be your key takeaways for the attendees as how Rapid and Loqate can help businesses as they're looking to start grow their digital commerce footprint? Justin, we'll start with you. And
Yeah, thanks, Naki. I think it's two-pronged, right? So after the businesses have made the decision to get in the game, which everybody has, right? They've been thrust into that position. It's two-pronged, right? It's developing seamless, consistent, frictionless customer experiences on the front end of the transaction. So what does that mean? So in an omni-channel world where there's brick and mortar activity of, call it curbside pickup, what have you, online ordering, ordering via a mobile device, or ordering via a desktop application, all of those applications need to work in a similar way and deliver a consistent customer experience, and that experience should be as frictionless as possible. Right. So when we're looking at shopping cart abandonment, for example, there's been dozens of probably hundreds of studies over the years that the faster a customer can check out and fill out the forms on a website and get through the payment process on the website, and the more choices that they have with payments, the more likely they are to complete their order. And so at Loqate, what we've seen and why we do business with some of the marquee names like Nike and Adidas and Kohl's and the Nordstroms of the world is that especially when they're crossing borders, customers want to enter in their information quickly, and they are able to auto-complete their address in line with the payments and shipping workflows from the consumer. And then the second prong of that is on the back end, from the merchant's point of view. You want to make sure that you're doing business with the right person and so doing that in a compliant manner. And so the relationship with Rapid and Locate started with KYC, and so location, a person's address, a business address, is a key component of the individual identification workflow. Right, so that's where it starts, and then as you go a little bit, looking at it from the retailer's point of view, if you go downstream to transportation and logistics and supply chain, tracking your supply chain and ensuring that the proper addresses, geocodes, delivery points are entered into the order and not only aid in completion, but save millions of dollars annually in failed delivery costs, and ensure that the right item is delivered to the right person.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Eric, would you like to comment anything on this? Key takeaways?
I think just to highlight some of the points that Justin has made, as well as maybe add a few. So similar to what Justin is highlighting, is that conversion at checkout is key to success. What Rapid has seen time and time again is not only is it about the speed of conversion, but it's actually even the option to convert. If one of your customers gets to checkout and he or she cannot pay, whether it's a business, a person, whether they're shopping for something worth $5 or $500 or $5,000, if he or she is not able to pay, because the payment methods that you've presented as an option are not ones that they have, they will not transact with you. So in this conversion of what is a digital transformation mindset is, let's hope that we do not find ourselves across another, call it shock to the system over the next 5 to 10 years. But ultimately, what we need to do to have a digital mindset is not think incrementally. The strategy that companies have had to say, let's dedicate 5-10% of our budget to digital has actually put them in a significantly worse situation than those that have already many years beforehand were investing in having omni-channel strategy, as well as understanding that digital is the future. The second thing that we've also seen as it relates to the digital commerce mindset is that those companies that already understood and embraced effectively the diversity of the world from a payments perspective were better suited and therefore should really be thinking that way on a go-forward basis. As it relates to creating a great customer experience, what we've seen time and time again is understanding that there actually is a way to create a payments experience that incorporates these local payment methods, as well as incorporates the type of information that we can get from Loqate and others as it relates to minimizing fraud. Being able to quickly verify the address, being able to do KYC if so required, are all things that help also minimize the exposure of a company to fraud. I think that ultimately what we would ultimately say as it relates to leading to economic recovery is look across your portfolio of selling geos, look across your portfolio where you're able to sell into or where you would like to be able to sell into, and recognize that your ability to actually capture a diversity of different sources of buyers can be a significant accelerant as it relates to your ability to recover from the current situation, or if you're in a situation now where you're already actually in a very good state, to even further accelerate your growth.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. Very insightful again. I believe we are all done with our presentations. Thank you for sharing such great insights, both Justin and Eric. Let's get to our Q&A. For audience, please submit your questions using chat function, chat toolbar on the bottom. Let's give a few seconds, see if you're getting any questions. All right, I think we've got a couple of questions so far, so let me go ahead and start. I think it looks like, Eric, the first one is for you here. And you have answered it already, but just to kind of reiterate. So from top of your mind, what are the payments related pain points that you or your business are experiencing today? So I guess in perspective of Rapid.
So the payments, if you're referring to what are the payments pain points that our clients are experiencing today, I think that the number one pain point that we hear from our clients, particularly as it relates to this conversation that we're talking about, which is ultimately a purchase discussion, is the fact that merchants are seeing that they need to be able to collect payments and that they maybe haven't actually adequately prepared themselves to collect payments from a diversity of different methods. So just taking an example, even just in the US, of clients that perhaps were used to accepting check as a form of payment, what they're realizing is that they may have actually had checks and they may have had credit cards, but they haven't actually figured out how to integrate ACH into their ability to collect payments. This is the same dynamic that we're hearing from clients that have said to us, I want to now expand into these new markets, or perhaps I already did expand into these new markets, but yet I didn't consider the fact that people wanted to be able to pay in Europe using Ideal, or they wanted to pay in using SoFort. And now I'm in this situation where I know there's a market, I know that there's people that continue to be able to purchase, but yet I haven't actually considered or implemented a way to engage with them from a payments perspective. So I think the number one challenge we're hearing from our clients is, how do I do this quickly? And how do I do this in a low cost manner? What we're ultimately seeing as a backdrop to that is that the COVID situation is either leading to significant, call it aggressive growth behavior from some of our clients, but also leading to this revisiting of what does my tech stack look like? What does my payment stack look like? And how do I rationalize costs where I do want to now expand, or I do want to be able to add these different payment methods in, but yet I can't really afford, both in monetary terms and as well as far as resources and time, to go do 10 different integrations to go support 10 different payment methods. How do I actually do that in a seamless manner? Those are kind of the things that we're mostly hearing from our clients.
Sure, very good. Thank you. Second question, I think probably both of you can tackle it. When you think about global expansion, which of the following region is on your expansion list? LATAM, APAC, or EMEA? Justin, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, so I think from the Locate business, we see a lot of activity in APAC, right? And when we're looking at cross-border commerce and location information in particular, it's the quality, the data quality, underlying data quality is the driver of the business for us, and allows us to provide more value. So we are seeing, pun intended, rapid increase of in data quality in APAC, and the ability to provide more value to our customers and partners in that region.
Great, thank you. Eric?
I think ultimately it really depends upon which are the businesses that the clients are in. There's a variety of different use cases. There's a use case of digital goods, where I think traditionally what we're seeing is interest from all over the world. And of course, perhaps just due to the fact that, let's say, video games, or perhaps in the case of digital consumptions, and also the sheer size of the population is greater in Southeast Asia, where clients that are in the world in the space of digital goods are mostly focused on perhaps Southeast Asia, and in some cases the Middle East. When it comes to physical goods, American businesses or US businesses have traditionally been receiving most of their interest from, call it a select group of countries. So Brazil being top, Peru being top, Mexico being top, Argentina being top, the Philippines being top. And ultimately, that is due to the fact that the supply chain is necessary, and ultimately that means shipping, and in some cases drop shipping dynamics have already been facilitated and already been set up. Now, with that said, it really depends upon the business that you're in. If you are a specialist business that is selling very high-end sneakers such as StockX, you're actually seeing, despite the fact that shipping might be more expensive, more complicated, you'll see a significant amount of interest in Southeast Asia, or in some cases mainland China. So if I'm thinking about global expansion, from a payments perspective, our perspective is you should really be thinking about the world, and you should be prepared to sell to the entire world. If you're thinking about where I should localize and where I should actually think about shipping, I think that what you're going to find is that, one, you probably already have an indication of that based upon where you're seeing web traffic and where you're actually seeing people purchasing using cards. And then after that is probably very much related to your understanding of the consumer preferences.
Great, thank you. While you have the floor, and then Justin will ask you the same question, and this is the last one. Do you see digital spending leveling off once the lockdown is over? Eric?
I think that for certain categories, it might level off. So we have clients that are in the business of doing grocery delivery. And I think that they might see some leveling off. But I also think that it's ultimately that many of their businesses are reaching new plateaus, in the sense that there's been a significant conversion of people recognizing that they can order food in, they can order services in, they can order their groceries in. And if, let's say, just choosing as a hypothetical that 1 out of 10 purchases they were doing was home delivery, they're now moved to a dynamic where 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 of the purchases are now home delivery. Will those numbers sustain? Maybe not 10 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 purchases, but I think we definitely will see that it will not go back to the 1 out of 10. And that's an important kind of realization, is that digital will just reach an entirely new plateau, and will then sort of return to a certain degree of the precursor or the previous growth rate, but it has a step function up. And therefore, you need to be prepared to be playing to a certain degree in this new level, this new playing field.
Great, thank you. Justin, what about you? Do you see digital spending leveling off once the lockdown is over, or?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Eric's comments, but when the lockdown is over is probably something that we should focus on. There are certain industries like travel, for example, that people aren't going to sit on a 12-hour flight until a statistically significant number of the world's population have been vaccinated for this. And when we look at our own communities in other brick and mortar businesses, there's going to be some element of social distancing in place until we do get some sort of ubiquitous vaccination or treatment, right? And the most optimistic estimates for those timelines are a year from today, and I think probably more realistically, it's the supply chain and distribution challenge for something that everybody in the world needs to receive. We're probably at least a couple years out until we get a statistically significant number of people vaccinated or access to a treatment that comes into the market. So we're likely to see long-term habits get formed, and like Eric mentioned, if 8 out of the 10 transactions that were previously brick and mortar have turned to digital transactions, we might see a leveling off, but that step change is going to be pretty powerful, and long-term habits are going to get formed.
Very good point. And thank you again, gents, for attending. For the audience, we're almost out of time, but if you can just give me 20 more seconds, we'll take a quick poll. Can we please launch the poll and let me know when it's done? There are about 2 questions. Great. Thank you, everyone. And especially to our speakers, Eric and Justin, for your time. Stay healthy and stay digitalized. Appreciate it. Cheers.